We are back. Another episode of The Gold Standard. Charlie Goldsmith and Joe Daneman. We're jumping right into Reds conversation because the Reds are on the move and fighting to get one of the final wildcard spots in the National League. I'll say it right here, Charlie, and I want your reaction. To me, right now, the Reds look like a playoff team, a team that I would predict makes the playoffs. Do you agree?
They definitely look like a playoff team when they face other playoff teams. But when they face bad teams, they've not quite collapsed. That might be a bit too strong, but they've collapsed to a lot of those moments. So it's that consistency that for a team that's still young, and some guys have talked about this, establishing that offensive identity, not having a let up defensively, continuing to throw strikes later in games for some of the less experienced relievers. They've still got to clean that up against the worst teams they play. But this is a team, and I think Wednesday was a perfect example, with a real ceiling.
So we're taping this as of Thursday after the Reds finished off a series win against the Philadelphia Phillies and right before a huge weekend series against the first place, best record in baseball, red-hot Milwaukee Brewers, who always give the Reds trouble. Do you think it's the Reds and Mets for the final playoff spot? Do you think anybody else is in that equation?
I listen to what teams are telling me, and the fact that the Cardinals were sellers at the deadline and the Giants were sellers at the deadline, and you even had the Giants come out and say yesterday they're going to start playing more young players.
Okay.
So I don't see as much similarly the upside of a Cardinals to go on a run. I do see it as a two-team race between the Reds and Mets, factoring in, too, I think the Padres themselves are about to go on a run. The Mets have been collapsing. They still have the star power, the talent, the upside, the know-how in big moments to turn it around. But what's been going on there has opened the door for Cincinnati.
The trade deadline brought new players to Cincinnati, and everybody had an opinion on adding defense or adding a right-handed against left-handed specialist. I do want to talk about Miguel Andujar and what he's done. His first 10 games, 3 home runs, 8 RBI, huge moments, including the grand slam against the Phillies. Do you think he's earned the right to play every single day, adding that bat to the lineup? Because a lot of people said, oh, he's here to hit against lefties. Do you think he'll get more playing time?
This is very fluid. What's so interesting, maybe the most interesting thing to me about the Reds right now, is if you stacked up their hitters and made like a depth chart, 1 to, I'm going to say 11, and leave the backup catcher and Santiago Espinal to the side because they're not playing as much.
Okay.
And so you have Ellie, you have Steer, you have Friedel at the top. 4 through 11 is so clustered that Andujar was 11 on that list when the Reds traded for him. He wasn't going to play against righties. Kind of to help him get his feet under him, to kind of do him a favor, show him we believe in you. They gave him some shots against righties, and he took advantage of them. And that, again, gap between 11 and 4 is so clustered that he's already number 4 against right-handed pitching. So he's moved up that quickly. That shows to me how fluid this all is going to be. If Andujar has a cold week now coming forward, well, he could end up at 9, or he can end up at 11, or he could end up as we'll see. You know, if Austin Hayes, what's he now, 9, 10, 11? He could get hot, and he could end up by 4 by the end of the week. They're going to, I think, play this day by day and matchup by matchup.
It feels all of a sudden like the Reds lineup has gotten really long compared to what it was maybe 2 months ago. And to me, that's partly because of how well Spencer Steer's been hitting, certainly how well that Noelvi Marte is hitting. How important do you think those two, what they brought into the table here in the last couple of months, has been to the Reds' success?
Well, it's kind of been their story of the season. They've been at their best when they've had that right-handed power hitter being able to lengthen the lineup. And kind of what grinded my gears the most about the Reds in May and June is I always said at the time, like, you could tell the teams were waking up that day and thinking, how can we throw as many left-handed pitchers at TJ Friedel and Ellie De La Cruz as possible? Well, now you have an ability to punish that.
That's
with
right.
Steer getting hot, with Marte, who I think has arrived, with Andujar, who's now mashing and making teams think about bringing in left-handed pitchers for that segment of the lineup. There's depth, there's more power, there's more confidence from a lot of these guys. It does feel different.
I will fully admit right here on this show that I was very skeptical of Noelvi Marte, even early in the season when he was feasting on bad pitching. I think a lot of people, though, thought that the ability was there, that he eventually would do this. I always thought he was more potential than production. Now the production is right there where the potential is, and certainly we've even seen him make a play or two on defense from the outfield, but the fact that he's right there in, I would say, the 5, 6, 7 hole, if you can put him right there, boy, it just adds so much more to this team. But the Reds are still built on pitching, and that's how they're winning games. If you were to power rank where the Reds' starting rotation is right now in the major leagues, is it top 5? Is it top 3? Where do you think it is?
Especially with Lodolo coming back too, that's pretty high. And then add on to that, all right, what's their rank going to be? We can look at that, but they have the potential to, on any given night, have the best starting pitcher on the mound in a short playoff series, and that's incredibly valuable. The Brewers right now, I think, have some of that upside as well, especially with Mizorowski and Peralta, and they have great depth 1 through 5. The Reds have a better rotation than the Cubs. They have a better rotation than the Mets. That's been a weak spot for them. The Phillies certainly would have a better rotation than the Reds. That's kind of what they've been known for. The Padres don't quite have the depth while they do have some of the frontline guys, but the frontline guys have been hurt a bit, so I'd have to look at that a little closer, but the Padres should be in that conversation as well. The Dodgers should be in that conversation, but they've been so banged up and so injured that they're not quite there yet. So the Reds, you feel like, have a confident chance to win every single game, no matter who they're playing. And that all starts with their starting pitching.
So lay out the pitching staff for me now. Once Nick Lodolo gets back, it's confusing. It's a lot. There are so many scenarios. Terry Francona talked about him having initial conversations with Chase Burns. If you were trying to predict what it'll look like if they're all healthy when Nick Lodolo gets back, say we jump into a time machine. It's September 1st. Everybody's ready.
Everyone's back.
Who's your 5?
I think the most likely 5 by that point will be Green, Lodolo, Abbott, Littell, Singer. Even though Littell and Singer are probably their 6th and 7th best starters, we're now in the Chase Burns hybrid zone. All right, so Burns has, this is just a guess, 30, 40, maybe a little more than that, more innings to pitch this season. They have set the priority of having him pitch through the complete season and not having him go on any sort of break.
Okay.
The bullpen move, I think, is coming. They don't want to move him to the bullpen and then have to move him back to the rotation because starting pitchers get hurt. So they're trying to buy themselves some time, at least until Lodolo comes back, because by then they'd have 7. By the time they have 7, you feel like you have enough versatility or you have enough depth to be able to just pull the plug on Burns' starter movement to the rotation. Now, Nick Martinez is their 4th best starter, but because another area that's concerning with the Reds is where they're at in the 6th and 7th innings right now, like Ashcraft, Mall, and Barlow are kind of wild cards for the rest of the season. Like, they're in big roles. If Martinez can fill that slot and he would only be pitching in winning high-leverage scenarios, that's probably where they'd lean. But then in a playoff series, you'd be throwing him back into the rotation. So there's a lot going on, but they have depth.
Okay, we're back in the time machine. We're gunning it to 88. We go from September 1st now to October 1st. We're in a playoff series, okay? And it's a 5-game series. Who are your 3 starters in a 5-game series, or even 4 if they have to go that deep?
So here's the problem. You want to know the Reds haven't played a real playoff series since, 2012? And the format's changed a lot since then. I'm going to have to refresh myself on the format, the days off, the structure of these series. I believe it's a 3-day series to start with back-to-back-to-back.
Yes, it's 3 games at the host city stadium only.
So, and at some point, if the Reds are there, I'm going to actually try to map out the whole playoffs for them. I just haven't gotten to that point yet, because it's all new. The Reds haven't been here in a while.
I think the hypothetical question, though, is
so
who would be the 4th?
But because there's more than that. Yes. So ideally, you start out a series, you throw your chips into the wild card series. The Reds probably would have to, and you do Green, Lodolo, Abbott in some order. Then Martinez would be available for super high leverage innings, so would Burns. Then you'd almost reassess and see where you'd be at heading into a hypothetical second series. The reason I say that is I'm not quite sure. I think your game 1 starter from the wild card would be ready for game 2 of the next series. So who would start game 4 then? What would that depend on what you got out of Martinez and Burns in the first series and how aggressively you needed to use those chips? If not, then you have Littell and Singer's insurance. And then also you're playing the game on the back half of that series. Can any of these guys go on 3 days rest? So we'll get to that map, but the Reds have more options than most teams.
I could tell you got excited just thinking about it. I think you're going to be he's traveling this week, and you're going to be on a plane, like mapping out what the Reds rotation would look like in October. 2 more questions here on the Reds. The first being, we do the thermometer. Where's your thermometer now? It's been around 86, 87 the last time we talked. Do you think that's still the ceiling for their wins, or do you think they can go higher?
Give me 88. Yeah. It's positive for sure. But I think the Mets, frankly, collapse has been a part of this conversation as well.
Question.
And why the Reds' playoff odds have improved. And this is still a Reds team that had a very disappointing weekend in Pittsburgh last weekend that I think still has to show some more day-to-day consistency to be pushing up into kind of the upper tier of that wild card conversation just from a pure ability standpoint. So, but this is a team that has a real shot to make the playoffs. And then again, the theme of upside, and they got even more upside when they got Hunter Green back, is something I keep going back to.
The last Reds question is an important one. It's a one that a lot of Reds fans, especially on social media, have been asking about. When is Sal Stewart going to make his way to the big leagues? He's tearing the cover off the ball in AAA. You can't miss his highlights every single day of whatever social media platform you're on. Is there a thought, a plan, a hope that Sal Stewart will be in Cincinnati in September?
So first you look at track record. In 2023, the Reds called up CES without like a definitive spot to play him during the summer. And then they especially, and here's the one I keep going back to, they called up Noelvi Marte with no definitive spot to play him. Ellie was actually their third baseman at the time. They called him Noelvi up after he had played 39 games in AAA.
Okay.
Sal has played and has played about 23 games. You also have to include Hector Rodriguez, an outfield prospect, maybe the second best position player prospect in this farm system behind Sal Stewart. Hector can rake. He's aggressive, and I don't think he's getting enough credit and recognition right now either. Remember how I said the whole 4-11 thing?
Yeah.
Well, really, it's 4-13. And Sal and Hector are part of this conversation. You can make the case right now that they would belong as middle-of-the-order bats on this Reds team. A small problem is that Cabrian Hayes and Miguel Andujar are kind of just taking their spots.
Yeah.
But especially when you get later into the season and you're not kind of missing a chance to develop in AAA. Also, in 2023, the Reds had like 11 guys rotating through 9 spots at this point in the summer. And then they went out west, and when they came back, Votto, India, Fraley, and McClain were all hurt. So spots will open up too. Guys will get cold who are hot now. This is all fluid. Things could change, and at some point I think a window will open if Hector and Sal keep producing.
Now the Bengals, as we tape this, are getting ready for preseason game number 2. That's Monday Night Football in Washington against the Commanders. We now have a few weeks of training camp. We have one preseason game under our belts to analyze this team. Let's start with preseason game number 1. What was your biggest takeaway from the Bengals' performance against the Eagles?
I always make a list of the plays, and what was stunning to me as I went back through like the plays that the Bengals' first-team defense allowed was how it wasn't even scheme. It was familiar technique and ability, just pure one-on-one stuff that we saw guys struggle with last year that showed up again. So Josh Newton struggling he gets his head turned, he kind of loses the ball behind him, allows a catch down the sideline. We've seen that. DJ Turner allowed a pivotal slant. There was a Logan Wilson ended up allowing the catch, but Miles Murphy should have gotten a sack. All he had to do, he was back in the backfield. He just had to shed the tackle, and he just can't get that finishing move. There were 2 or 3 more plays, too, like that, where things that we know guys struggle at, you saw exposed again.
Yeah.
It was a reminder of the technique and kind of the fundamentals and just the pure one-on-one stuff that a lot of key Bengals have to be better with. Also the importance of Cam Taylor, Britt, and Dax Hill, because the cornerback position is going to be huge.
I think the one caveat would be that the Bengals played, and correct me if I'm wrong, I would say they played without 4 of their 7, 8 best defensive players when you add Trey Hendrickson, Dax Hill, Cam Taylor, Britt, and
B.J. Hill. I would think those are 4 of their 8 best defensive players, maybe even top 7 defensive players. So they also said, and this is one of the things you always hear from a locker room after preseason, they weren't showing a lot on defense. It was vanilla defense. How much do you think that is baked into the performance, that they didn't have some of their best players and they were very basic on defense, on scheme? Well, yes, if DJ Avi ends up out wide for the Bengals, multiple guys have gotten hurt, you're going to be kind of in a nervous spot. DJ's a great tight end stopper, but he was playing out of position. But then again, you look at important guys on this defense, DJ Turner, Miles Murphy, like I was saying, Josh Newton. We saw those guys doing the things that they need to have improved at. And they're not there yet. And the hope and the idea is maybe they're there by October or November. And this is a defense that can build and get better as the year goes on. But to me, the preseason was a reminder just from a pure one-on-one perspective. Right. When you look at the matchups and the techniques that you're asking these guys to improve at, this is a process that they're not quite arrived at yet.
Where should the concern meter be for Bengals fans on the defense? Because I've said multiple times, they weren't going to fix this defense in one offseason. This is a multi-offseason rebuild. They threw Al Golden at it to be a difference maker. They drafted a lot. 5 of their 6 draft picks are on defense. TJ Slayton, I still think, is going to be a big difference maker for this team, and I think is underrated as far as a free agent goes. Shamar Stewart has looked good. Certain players haven't. Where should the concern meter for Bengals fans be that, okay, this is going to be too much like 2024 for us to get our hopes up that this team can win playoff games?
I think all you can say is I don't know. They don't know. What they've looked for and sought after is splash moments in the preseason and in training camp to hang their hat on. They've had some in training camp, obviously not against the Eagles, but they've almost been trying to tell themselves that they're a confident unit, and I think that intangible is the thing that you'd like to see a little more from a defense that's starting to really believe in itself. There's talents, and they see that. They feel that. I feel that. as I see the pure individual potential of a Cam Taylor-Britt, a Dax Hill, a Shamar Stewart, a TJ Slayton and his ability. Logan Wilson, much healthier than he was last season. Demetrius Knight is actually a splash playmaker, which isn't what I expected. So, there's stuff here, but there's also clear one-on-one matchup, fundamental technique stuff that will be a process. They're not just that.
You had a great tweet, and I thought you were spot on when you said the Bengals season comes down to likely what?
Cornerback play, making one-on-one matchups.
Yeah.
Because when it's been those big moments in camp, it's been, the 5 pass breakup day by DJ Turner.
Right.
It's been Cam Taylor-Britt being 2023 Cam Taylor-Britt. It's been not letting quarterbacks just hone in on a guy, pick on that matchup, expose him. The Bengals need that. That's the path. That's been the path to their stops this season or this summer in training camp. And I think because it's also not going to be a dominant overall pass rush, and because their safeties aren't going to be playmakers, that's going to be the path to stops again this season.
Did you watch the All-22 from the Eagles game? Break it down. Okay, let's do a stock up and stock down, just individual players. What player, after watching the game film for the Bengals and Eagles, stood out to you as a guy that performed well and your stock up on as we head to Game 2 of the preseason?
We'll go both sides of the yang, so I'll use this to set up the other. Dylan Fairchild built on everything he's done in camp to be a physical, intense, maybe not completely, he's still going to have those rookie moments, but he knows how to play, and he just has a good feel for how to play, and he has the tools to make up for whatever mistakes he makes. He was a big winner to me because we stopped talking about him, and again, just even watching him in individual drills, the strength pops, and you saw more of that. You saw that really translate onto the field in his first game.
Stock down for the Bengals after watching the All-22.
I didn't understand at the time why Lucas Patrick was there, diamond in the rough, all-in roll of the dice at right guard, and he looked bad. He looked bad. Quick losses, struggles in space, backed up what we've seen in training camp. I'd be looking for a right guard right now. Lucas Patrick hasn't shown anything yet, and yet he's been receiving all of the first-team reps at right guard for 2 weeks now, and the preseason game was his worst performance.
Preseason game number 2, Monday Night Football against Washington. What are you watching for?
Let's see the defensive line maybe try to take that next step. Shamar Stewart had some splash moments and then some learning moments, kind of got crumpled up on the ground once. Miles Murphy separating from that sack, like I mentioned. Chris Jenkins has quietly had a very strong training camp. I've liked what I've seen from him. The other big thing is going to be on the back end, too, with Geno Stone out. It's been a pretty even split between Tyson Anderson and Dejon Anthony in that primary backup role, which is now a first-team role. I don't think that anyone could tell you who the guy is there right now. It's a complete who knows. They've even done some rotating where Tyson's run in on early downs and Dejon's come in for him on third down. So they just have so much to learn about those guys. They'll be in the spotlight.
Last question on the Bengals before we go to the Gold Rush, and I can't wait for the Gold Rush because we're playing random roulette with the Bengals roster again. Random roster roulette. There I go. I got the name for it. Jamar Chase and Joe Burrow. We've asked so many questions in so many ways of trying to get interesting answers out of important people with the Bengals on just how good these two are. Is there anything interesting from the last week after that game that you've had a discussion with, you've talked to in the locker room, that just puts into perspective how good that chemistry between those two players is?
Here's the thing I've been thinking about the most with them. How much of a veteran training camp this feels like for them. Like in previous years, we saw kind of Joe ride the highs and lows of camp in terms of, he'd start talking some smack, or I'm going to go for the kill here. He hasn't been doing that this year. He's kind of removed himself almost, and he's almost more like a coach playing quarterback in terms of how he's kind of putting all of his effort into coaching and developing and getting the details and nuances of alignments and plays and formations and things like that and developing guys around him. That seems to be his focus more than anything, and it's a sign of an older Joe. It's been a sign of an older Jamar as well. Now, Jamar has been right in the middle of a lot of these, fiery moments, conversations, trash talking, all of that. But he's kind of the glue of camp in terms of he's the guy that guys want to go up against to build their confidence.
Sure.
He's the guy that is making a point to challenge people in specific moments. It hasn't been about him at all. Jamar's gone at it from a perspective about kind of this is about you. And that's been impressive to see as well. They just both feel like veterans.
Here we go now with the Gold Rush. This is rapid fire questions to Charlie Goldsmith. If you're watching on the stream, I'm reaching for my cell phone because I have the entire Bengals roster on my Google app. This is random roster roulette for the Bengals where I pick a player and Charlie gives me a nugget, a fact, a fun fact, a cool story about that player. Last time it was hilarious, some of the names I landed on. We're going to do the same thing again. I'm throwing it in the randomizer right now with my thumb, looking at Charlie.
Yep.
I'm not cheating, and I landed on Cam Sample. Cam Sample is number 1 on the random roster roulette. What do you got on Cam?
I think that Cam Sample is one of the guys who there's the biggest difference on kind of how the fan base views him and how the coaching staff views him. He's kind of the Drew Sample of the defense. I think he's going to play also a lot more defensive tackle this season as they move guys around the line. Coming back from a torn Achilles, a game captain against Philadelphia, kind of a true glue guy, physical against the run. My favorite Cam Sample story, and it is a good story. I mean, you remember Logan Wilson's interception against the Titans, right?
I do, of course.
That doesn't happen if Cam Sample literally doesn't crawl off the field. He had, I believe, pulled his groin and he couldn't walk, and he was done on the previous play, and he would have stayed down. But the Titans were going, and he had to go. He crawled off that field.
Amazing.
Ball gets snapped, ball gets tipped, Logan gets the pick.
Great memory, great nugget. Okay, number 2 on our random roster roulette is Kendrick Pryor. Wide receiver, Kendrick Pryor, 5'11", 189.
Kendrick Pryor is the shortest contested catch winner in football. That's actually his game. Like, he goes up and gets the ball. Now, I will say this, like risers and fallers in camp, I expected Kendrick to kind of be elevated into that wide receiver 6 conversation. Kind of hasn't popped at camp like he has in previous camps with his ability to make those twitchy plays.
Okay, number 3 in the random roster roulette is Cam Grandy, tight end Cam Grandy.
One of the best stories on this team.
Really?
Like, I believe Division III quarterback, then transferred to, I believe, Southern Illinois, played tight end while he committed 3 false starts against Tennessee, and that's what he's most remembered for. When Eric All got hurt, they didn't have a way to replace him, but they said, you know what, we believe so strongly in the power 12 personnel ideas with 2 tight ends, that we're just going to play Cam. And I was actually talking to Zach before the Ravens game that week, and Cam walks by, and Zach goes, all right, here we go, Cam, big week. And that ended up being the week his role got expanded. And I like Cam, and Zach likes Cam.
Phenomenal nugget. Okay, next one, we'll do 2 more here in the random roster roulette, and we're going to stop on Charlie Jones. Charlie Jones has been interesting because Bengals used a 5th-round draft pick on Charlie Jones out of college. Yeah. 4th-round draft pick, so even better. That's good draft capital on Charlie Jones. And Charlie he's made plays. He had the kick return against the Cleveland Browns for a touchdown that sparked a Bengals win. But injuries have been a big part of his story as his career starts. What's your nugget on Charlie?
He's kind of in a similar bucket as Jermaine Burton and Isaiah Williams in terms of guys who have vertical speed and special teams ability. And Charlie's the one who's kind of won that battle. So he's kind of solidified an active game day role. They drafted him to be in the slot, but he's added that outside receiver stuff onto his plate. The most impressive thing is he did have, I don't know, he was banged up by the end of last season. Kind of rehab was his focus during the early portion of the offseason, and he's still come back looking completely ready to go, like he's missed no time, like he was ready to turn that gear up as much as we've seen from him. And Dan Pitchers even said he's playing his best football. Okay, last one in the random roster roulette for the Gold Rush is we land on Chris Jenkins Jr., who you mentioned earlier in the podcast you think is having an underrated, quiet, very good camp. Year number 2 for a defensive tackle. The Bengals put draft capital in. What's your nugget on Chris? You asked me earlier who popped in the preseason. Jenkins was one of their best playmakers in that game, especially on the goal line. Kind of they had that stand before the tush push there to end it. Chris Jenkins, I mean, the classic Chris Jenkins story is he came in for his pre-draft interview with Zach Taylor in the building at Paycor, and Zach said of all of them, he's never had less to ask a player because he was like the cleanest prospect of all time. Yeah. I wanted to see more. I felt pretty critical about Chris's 2024 season. Now he had, I believe, thumb surgery early in the year, missed the start, never really got to use both hands. I was pretty critical of Chris at the end of last season in terms of how I viewed him. He's got I've turned on that because of the added gear he has with the strength and the hands this summer. Now the gold nugget. This is when we dive into Charlie's notebook for a story he's working on or a great interview he's done inside of the Bengals or Reds locker room. You can read all of his work right now on Charlie's chalkboard. You just wrote a great article about Hunter Green and all the days he missed and the 7 weeks left and what could be the biggest final month and a half of his season or his career so far. What's your nugget for us for the gold nugget this week? I'm going to go with the player I was hoping you'd mention, and that's backup long snapper Will Wagner. He's competing. It's a competition. Will Wagner is such an accurate long snapper that he can snap a ball, and he said give him 2 tries. I can guarantee I will spin the cap off of a Coke bottle.
He says that.
He's not kidding.
2 tries.
He said 2 tries.
Well, I think I need to get a TV camera somewhere and go do that.
Yeah.
Can he back it up?
Boy, that'd be something if the backup long snapper comes in bragging about something he can't actually do.
Well, Evan McPherson has videos out there when he got drafted.
Now, I
everywhere.
think the snapping is more impressive than the kicking.
Really?
Yeah.
I mean, the kicking is from, if you go back and look at Evan's field goal, it was like from 40 yards away, and he was spinning the cap off. And I don't know how many kicks it took for him to do that, but if a guy's only, how far does a punter drop back? 13, 14 yards? That's
but still, you're through the legs. It's a different athletic motion. Kicking's very natural. Snapping's very strange.
Is Cal Adamitis still the guy?
I read tomorrow on Fox 19. I'm kind of doing it as a bit, but I do have the long snapper story. Cal is, I don't want to say he's the Hunter Green. Cal is the, all right, Luis May's too much velocity. Zach Maxwell's too unproven, but he's the velocity guy. And then Will Wagner's remember Alex Young?
Yes, of course.
Will Wagner's Alex Young.
Great comparison. That's our latest edition of The Gold Standard. Make sure you read all of Charlie's work right now on fox19down.com/sports, Charlie's Chalkboard, where he updates with great material almost every single day, sometimes twice a day, Charlie.
It's that time of year.
Working? It is that time of year. Reds are trying to make a push for the playoffs. The Bengals are in the middle of the preseason, looking towards the start of the regular season in Cleveland. Charlie, we'll do it again next week, and we'll see where the Reds are after a huge weekend series against Milwaukee Brewers. That was The Gold Standard here on Fox 19 Now.